Hi everybody, I'm back today with another camera repair video. Today I have a Pentax ME Super, courtesy of a friend of mine, Brent. Brent, if you're watching this, here's that video I was telling you I was going to make. So, we're going to get right to it. There's actually not a lot wrong with this camera. The meter works, everything about it works great except for one thing, and that is that the shutter is, or rather the mirror, is very, very slow when it goes zoop. And so there's probably something on the mirror box. It's probably an issue that is not going to be surprising, but we're going to get right in there, and I'm just going to give basically a tutorial today of how to disassemble the Pentax ME Super to the point where you can service the shutter, all the innards of the mirror box, and essentially remove the mirror box all at the same time too. So we're going to get right to it. I'm going to start with the self-timer. The self-timer is a left-handed thread, so I just use a normal spanner, which turns to the right, and that gets this guy removed very easily. Let me use my trusty skewer here. I'm using a new microphone today just to hopefully reduce some of the extraneous noise in the background, so hopefully that is noticeable, that it's a little less noisy. Alright, so with that off, we get 4 little pieces that are just the part of the self-timer. So that's done, number 1. And that needs to be taken off because the leatherette needs to be removed in order for the, let me get that all together, the leatherette needs to be removed for the mirror box to come off. Alright, so next up is going to be the top cover. Starts off with this cap on the wind lever. This is also left-hand threaded. I've already loosened it a bit, so with my little stopper, righty-loosey, and that guy will come right off. Put that away. And then next up, we come here to the little nut that's up here. This guy is also left-hand thread, and that is all that is left-hand threaded on this camera. So it's just the self-timer and then the first 2 pieces of the shutter wind lever. So that is straightforward, and we can't forget this washer. There we go. There's that. Next up, I'm going to open up the back, and we're going to remove the rewind lever. It's an easy little, just put a skewer or a screwdriver in there and just loosen it up. It's a right hand thread, but this one happens to be a little bit tight on there. Alright, that goes off. Stash that away. You can take the back off or leave it on. Since I'm going to be handling it a bit more, I'm just going to leave the back on for now, but that's an easy removal later on. Alright, next up, just zoom in on this a little bit so it's a little easier to see. Next up is this nut right here, which is almost the same size as the nut. Oh, it's already loose? Well, no it's not. Good. This guy is right-hand threaded as normal. So we're just going to get the spanner set up there, and good old lefty-loosey. And then, again, as I've mentioned in my other videos, the exposure compensation dial, I always set it to ASA 100. Oops, out of frame. ASA 100 and 1x exposure compensation. So that guy comes off, and then those 2 pieces come off together. So then we are clear there, and we have exposed one of the screws that's needed to remove the top. Okay, before I do anything further, I'm just going to put this knob into the lock position, and that looks pretty good. So now we can actually just start taking the screws off that we need to remove the top. So we've got 2 screws on the top of the camera. There's one, zoom out a bit, one there, one next to the shutter selection dial, 2 on the sides of the pentaprism, as usual, there, and there. Oops. Doesn't seem to want to come out too easily. Maybe it needs a little coercion with a, there it is. Alright, that one's out. And then the last two are just on the back on either side of the viewfinder, as is typical. I think most cameras have it, have screws on there for the rear cover, but certainly for Pentax, it is almost always there. Alright, let me keep all 6 of those screws together. Alright, so there's that. And now the top cover just comes off in one piece. There's nothing to it. Unlike the Pentax Super program, which I featured in another video, there are no wires that need to be soldered to connect to the hot shoe. There is simply, is it easy to see here? Can I autofocus? Nope. Anyway, there's just like a little tab that just sits on a spring-loaded tab here. And so the electrical connection is just physical instead of, soldered on like that. Anyway, so the top removed. Easy peasy. Lots of stuff going on there. But for now, we're going to go straight to the bottom and remove the screws. There is a battery in there that will come out when I remove everything else. But we've got 1, 2, 3 screws to remove to unhook the bottom lid. So 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3. Gorgeous. Pop those away. Pop the lid away, and boop, batteries are in there. We'll set those to the side. Alright, and then we've got the entire interior of the bottom looking good, top looking good too. Now is kind of where things are going to get a little bit, not tricky, but this is where a lot of the details come into the disassembly here. So there are a number of wires that actually need to be unsoldered in order to remove the mirror box. So we're going to get to that. We're going to get started. Looks like there's a piece of tape right here. This, I'm going to remove, whoops, let me make sure I'm in frame here. Alright, so I'm going to remove this piece of tape in here. That's just going to get in my way. So these 3 wires, they are red, blue, and green. Those need to be unsoldered from the bottom. That's all that needs to be done at the bottom of the camera. And at the top, we actually have a lot of different wires here. So we've got a yellow wire up front here, which is for the light meter. The second yellow wire here does not need to be unsoldered. This yellow wire, this red wire up here needs to be unsoldered. This yellow wire up here needs to be unsoldered. Those both, the red is power. The yellow leads to the potentiometer here that actually tells the computer what ASA you've selected. And then on this side here, we've got a red and blue wire. Both of those need to be unsoldered. The hot shoe wire needs to be unsoldered. And then there are 4 wires that are very, very tiny inside this little circuit board area that also need to be unsoldered. So there's a fair bit of work that needs to be done. Before I do that, I think I'll just really quickly pull off the leatherette just to show you how I do it. I just take a dental tool, handy dandy dental tool, and then the leatherette usually is in pretty good shape on these cameras. So I just find a corner, dig into the corner, and then just pull. And then once it's undone, I can really just go in with my fingers, and then hopefully that won't get too much in the way, and boom. So one piece done. The adhesive's usually crap, so I will almost always put some rubber cement back on once I've cleaned all the old adhesive off and whatever else. Okay, and then same deal here on the other side. I'm just going to pull up on a corner, and then leatherette comes off. I'm going to do the other corner on this one too, just to really loosen that up. Come on. Just need enough to get my finger under it. There we go. And then that's both of those sides up, and we are looking good. Alright, so that's both pieces of leatherette off of the camera. There they are. Those are the only 2. The back obviously doesn't need to be removed. That can definitely be left. And then before I zoom out, I just want to highlight occasionally if the mirror is jammed, this lever, there's a little viewfinder right here underneath the leatherette. This can sometimes be a way to fix a mirror without having to completely open up the camera. This is the linkage where essentially the shutter release button. Let's see if I can actuate that while I'm on camera. This is where the shutter release button actually links to the mirror up lever. So occasionally there are some issues where if you don't want to have to disassemble the whole camera, it would be enough to just get in there, and if something's jammed up, that's great. I don't think that's the case today, because there's certainly a bit more at play here, and I wanted to demonstrate the disassembly. So I'm going to zoom back out here, and I'm going to get ahead to soldering. So I'm going to start with the wires on the bottom. These guys usually go relatively quickly. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to put this into frame in the shot. Oh, let me see what I can do. Let me just gently place the lid back on. Mind you, when removing the lid, there is always a piece of trim that I think has, at this point, fallen somewhere, but I'll find that before the camera goes back together. But there's almost always a piece of trim that sits right under that lid there, that is a part of the camera. You can see here with that lid in place where that's missing. I think it's just fallen somewhere nearby, but I will handle that when I can later. Alright, so we are now in here, and I am just going to, let's see, I am going to start off and get the red wire unsoldered. There's one, and then the second one is blue. Green is in the way, so I'm going to do that one first. Green, and then blue is right there. Okay, so we're looking at from the front of the camera to the back, green, blue, red. Occasionally these wires will be in a different configuration, but most often it is indeed, and it's 3 wires, whereas in the Super program it's 4 wires. So those are pretty quick. Okay, now I can remove the top once again, and now we're getting to the difficult ones. Okay, the ones up front are actually pretty easy, but it kind of gets tricky once you are up here. So I'll just demonstrate. Like I said, we only need the one yellow wire removed, so I'm just going to pinch it and then just barely heat up that solder pad. Come on. Even need to turn up the heat on my soldering iron. There we go. There's that one. Here's the red power. This guy is basically, it just comes in directly from the battery. And then this yellow one, which also connects to that potentiometer, has nothing to do with the other one. And then that pink one stays onto the hot shoe, so we're going to leave that. Up next is just the hot shoe here on the back of the camera. So I'm just going to remove that right there. Beautiful. And then we're going to do blue, which is on the bottom here. And then red, which is on top. There's just these 2 wires right here. There we go. Gorgeous. And gosh, there seems to be a lot of solder on there. Hopefully that's not going to cause any issues. Anyway, and so now I have to basically position the camera to where you guys won't be able to see it. But the 4 little wires, including one little brass spring in here, are rather difficult to get to. So it might be out of your view, but I'm just gonna, well, I guess you'll be able to kind of see what I'm doing, but I'm just gonna get in here. So the way I'm looking at it from left to right is white, brown, the brass wire, blue, and pink. These will basically just come off incredibly easily. These are very fine gauge wires, and so I just have like a very nice needle tip on my soldering iron. So it's all pretty easy. All right, and that's that. Believe it or not, that's already done. Those are all the wires that needed to come off. So let's stash my soldering iron and unplug that. So I won't be needing that anymore. All right, so where we are now is basically we can remove the mirror box. We're basically there. Now the only thing to worry about at this point is making sure you don't lose any parts. So first of all, there are 2 screws here. Let's see if I can get that a little more. Yes, good. So this screw right here, it's kind of brass colored one, not the one next to it, but this one, and the identical one on the other side. Those are the 2 that hold the mirror box in place up top. And then of course there are 4 screws in the front that hold the mirror box in place there. So I'm just going to start off with the 2 screws on the back. Both of these screws underneath where the mirror box sits have little washers. I believe they're made of brass. We'll see here in just a sec once it's all out. And And then this one on this side also has a little brass ledge that essentially just holds the circuitry in place. So it just kind of pushes against that ribbon to keep it from interfering with anything else. Oops, stuff going flying over here. Okay, so I'm going to stash those away. And then now we can just get right to the, grab a bigger screwdriver, go to the mirror box. Same deal here. These all have washers underneath this big plate. However, they usually stick in place pretty well, but it is important to know how many washers are under each one because those have everything to do with the alignment of the mirror box with respect to the shutter. So we're just gonna get started and remove those. The screws are all identical, so you don't need to worry about mixing those up. But knowing which washers go where and how much or how many washers there are under each one is quite important. So do keep track of that if you plan to do this repair yourself. All right, so we are almost there. Beautiful. So those are the 4 mirror box screws. Okay, so now everything should be loosened up real nicely. Let's just carefully start wiggling. Okay, so you can probably start seeing here. See if I can get a little closer to the camera. Those are the washers I was talking about. So there's a washer right there and a washer right there. So just be careful that those aren't going to come flying out when you remove this. Oh yeah, I forgot one thing. The shutter needs to be cocked in order to remove the mirror box. So I'm just going to very gently take this, cock the shutter, and the one thing that it does that's important is it moves this lever out of the way. This is the indicator that tells you on the lid of the camera whether the shutter is cocked or not. That gets in the way of removing the mirror box, so that does need to be out. And then you basically just very carefully tease the mirror box out, and then oops, I forgot to unsolder one wire. That is my bad. Of course I forgot to do that one because it's the most hidden one. It is this little purple wire here. I don't know if you can see it. Let me hook it. This purple wire here, this is one of the other wires that connects to the potentiometer to tell the camera what ASA you're shooting at. So we're just gonna, hopefully my soldering iron's still warm. Nope. It's gonna have to warm up a bit in order to desolder that. Once I have it, once it's warm enough, it'll be good. In the meantime, I will just showcase the bottom. So those 3 wires that we unsoldered from the bottom, they're right down here. So ultimately, those guys just get pulled. Oops. They just get pulled up through a hole right here. So they will just come out. So I'm really just waiting on being able to unsolder this one wire. Keep snagging on stuff. Alright, let's give it another try. Come on, buddy. I know you got the heat. Let's turn up the temp a bit. Shouldn't have unplugged it. Come on. There it is. Okay, so now the wire's out. Goody goody. Turn that temp down. I'm going to leave it plugged in just in case we need it. So now, shy of getting those wires out, there we go. Okay, let's zoom things out a bit. Alright, so there we are. There is the mirror box and the rest of the internals of the ME Super. It's pretty great. You can test both of these pieces independently. For the shutter, it's pretty straightforward. Some of these cameras have like slightly, I think it depends on where in the run these were manufactured. There are a lot of little differences in the ME Supers, early models versus late models. But with the shutter cocked, so you can see, I guess I'm upside down here now. Let me get in on this and just kind of showcase what's going on here. So that little window that I showed earlier, where the linkage between the shutter release button and the mirror box occurs, so that's that little piece there that moves up and down. And then usually this little lever down here, yep, is exactly, that kind of happened pretty quick. Let's do let's do that one again. So we're just going to cock the shutter again, and then one more time. So it's a very small, let me get a good angle for you guys. It's this lever right down here. So that is, you basically just push it downwards on it, And then if you watch the shutter, let me get that in some good light. Boom! Yeah, it's as easy as that. Pretty cool. And so you can kind of manipulate this to do flash sync, which is 1/125th, and then bulb mode as well. But of course, without the battery and anything soldered, there's no electronic shutter. But we know that it works. It's just the mirror that was having issues on this camera. So let's have a quick look at the mirror box before I sign off. Alright, and I'm back. My battery, or my memory card on my camera ran out of space. So I just had to make a quick cut there. Anyway, we just finished looking at the body of the camera and how that works. Now we're back to the mirror box. We're just gonna... I'd already covered some of this while my camera died. Anyway, I'm gonna recap real quick. So the shutter cocking mechanism on the body triggers this lever down here on the bottom of the mirror box, and that basically loads the spring so that everything's ready, and normally the mirror action happens really quickly. The little window that I talked about earlier on the front where you can see that linkage, that is the first piece that comes in and that raises the mirror. So let's activate that. You can see the mirror went very slow. And then here on the side of the mirror box, let's try to get some good light on here. Perfect. On the side of the mirror box here, this lever gets pushed downwards, or rather, after the shutter fires, another lever in the body of the camera pushes this down and then releases the mirror back down to its normal position. So I'm going to turn back around and press this, and so you can see that the mirror slides right back into place. So now it's time to discover why this camera has a slow mirror. I'm just going to do a little diagnosis here. This part is not particularly slow. Maybe it's slightly sluggish, so I could definitely lubricate the mirror a bit. Some of this foam up here is a little bit crudified, so it's possible that that is the culprit. But I'm kind of... something that rises that slowly is probably due to some other lubrication issue. So let's bring this guy back down and let's see. There is a particular bushing on these ME Supers that tends to go bad. It looks like this may have been a late ME Super where this isn't going to have any issues. Let's see if I can get a really good shot of this, because it is a little bit hidden in there. Ugh. Let's make sure we got some light. It's this. There's a little, yeah, this little white bushing right here. That is where the mirror return lever hinges. It's basically, that's where the action happens. And on early ME Supers, it looks like this may be a late model camera where they've actually fixed this. This bushing was made of, I believe, vulcanized rubber, and the lubricant that was used in the mirror box would have over time degrade these bushings, and it would cause the mirror to either stay locked up or go up and return really slowly on the basis of this lever basically not being functional. However, that doesn't seem to be the issue here, but I will probably not bore everybody with these details because I might have to go through and do quite a bit of testing to figure out exactly what the problem is, but I imagine it's just going to be a lubrication issue. So once I figure that out, I'll get this back together. The reassembly is exactly the same as the disassembly on this camera. It's just important that if you're taking on this project, you meticulously keep track of which wires get soldered where. That's really the biggest thing. And if you're not confident in your soldering job or skills, definitely send this to a technician who's capable of handling these tools and doing the job properly. I've gone through a lot of ME Supers in the past, and I've really kind of gotten the hang of the disassembly and what all goes where. But it can be quite a lot, and the ME Super isn't even that sophisticated of a camera as far as auto exposure goes. The guts of the body of the camera still have fully mechanical shutter speed sync and bulb mode, whereas cameras by Pentax later on, like the Super program, it's fully electronic, so you can't even use the flash sync or the bulb mode when you don't have a battery in the camera. So the ME Super is a nice kind of halfway. It's still very serviceable if you know what you're doing, and it's not as sophisticated as some of those later cameras. Anyway, with that, I think I'll sign out here. I hope that at least learning how to disassemble these cameras has been helpful for you guys. And who knows if I'll make a follow-up once I have this up and running. It will be up and running in any case at some point. and I will probably shoot with this camera and enjoy it. I personally really like the ME Supers because it having auto exposure just kind of ups the pace a little bit if you're doing any type of candid film photography. Uh, and then, of course, you still have the fully manual mode, flash sync, and bulb mode if you wanted to do long exposures or any of that stuff. So they're really robust cameras. They are very readily available and honestly not that expensive. So if you can service them, they are really fantastic. With that, I will thank everybody for watching, and I hope you join me next time with whatever it is I'll be working on then. Thanks, guys. Bye bye.